It was one of those rare nights where everything just felt right. The smell of rosemary and butter filled the air, candles flickered softly, and laughter floated around the table like a familiar song I hadn't heard in years. My parents were teasing Mark about his cooking skills, and even Ben was in high spirits, talkative, a little too generous with the wine. For once, there were no deadlines, no tension, no unspoken words between Mark and me. Just warmth, or so I thought. Then Ben laughed, loud, carefree, careless, and said, "Man, she's way different from the other one you brought last month." The words hit the table harder than any plate could have. For a second, I thought I misheard him, but the silence that followed told me I hadn't. My father's smile froze. My mother blinked. Mark's face went pale. And me? I felt something inside me shift, quietly, sharply, like glass cracking under pressure. I turned to Ben, keeping my voice calm, too calm. "What did you just say?" He stumbled over a laugh, eyes darting to his brother. "Oh, I was joking, of course." Mark snapped at him to shut up, his tone sharp enough to slice through the room. And that's when I knew. The truth was sitting right there between them. He didn't deny it fast enough. He didn't even look at me. And beneath my smile, something cold started to grow. The rest of the evening felt like a bad play I couldn't walk out of. My smile stayed, but it wasn't mine anymore. It was mechanical, polite, stitched on just tightly enough to keep everything from unraveling. I poured more wine, laughed at the wrong moments, and asked if anyone wanted seconds, even though my stomach was in knots. Every time Mark opened his mouth, I watched his lips move and wondered how many lies had already passed through them. I didn't say a word. I just watched and waited. When dessert was finally served, I could barely taste the chocolate mousse I'd spent hours making. My mother complimented it, and I thanked her like nothing was wrong. Across the table, Mark avoided my eyes, focusing too hard on his plate. Ben, poor fool, had gone completely silent, his guilt written all over his flushed face. He didn't mean to expose anything, but he had. And now, I couldn't unhear those words. The other one. They kept replaying in my head like a cruel echo. I caught Mark's reflection in the wine glass, his jaw tight, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for his drink. That small nervous twitch gave him away more than any confession could. I didn't need to ask for the truth. It was already written across his face. By the time everyone said their goodbyes, my mind had stopped spinning and turned still, eerily still. Something had broken inside me. Yes, but something else had awakened too. A quiet, deliberate kind of clarity. After everyone left, the house felt too quiet. The laughter that had filled the walls earlier now seemed fake, like a sound from another life. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the half-empty wine glasses, the crumpled napkins, the crumbs that told the story of a perfect evening gone wrong. I could still hear Ben's voice in my head, looping over and over, refusing to fade. The other one. Just 3 words, but they'd peeled back everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Mark came up behind me, trying to act normal, his tone light. "That went well, didn't it?" I turned, studying his face. The faint sheen of sweat at his temple, the stiffness in his smile, all of it screamed guilt. "It did," I said quietly. "Except for that part where your brother almost ruined your performance." His eyes darted away. He mumbled something about Ben drinking too much, but I barely listened. I was done playing the fool. Every word he said only confirmed what I already knew. The truth didn't need proof. It had already shown its face. That night I lay in bed beside him, pretending to sleep. He snored softly, oblivious, while I stared at the ceiling and replayed every detail. His hesitation, Ben's slip, my parents' awkward silence. The picture was clear now, and no amount of lies could blur it again. By morning, I'd already decided what came next. I wouldn't confront him yet, not directly. I'd smile, I'd wait, and I'd learn. If he wanted to play a game, fine. He just didn't realize he'd chosen the wrong opponent. The next morning, I woke up before Mark, just lying there, listening to his even breathing beside me. It's funny how a single sentence can change everything. The way you look at someone, the way the air feels around them. I used to think silence meant peace, but now it felt heavy, thick with secrets. I made coffee, watched him leave for work, and smiled as he kissed my cheek. But the moment the door shut, my smile vanished, and a plan began to take shape. If I was going to uncover the truth, I had to play it smart. So I texted Ben, pretending everything was fine. "Hey, thanks for coming last night. Want to grab a coffee later?" He replied too quickly. Guilt makes people fast. A few hours later, we sat across from each other at a cafe, the kind with chipped mugs and the smell of burnt espresso that somehow felt comforting. He looked uneasy, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup, avoiding my eyes. I didn't blame him. He knew exactly why we were there. I leaned back, smiling as if it were just a friendly chat. "So, about last night," I said lightly, stirring my coffee. "Who was this other one you mentioned?" His head jerked up, eyes wide. For a moment, I almost pitied him. He wasn't cruel, just careless. "Look, Laura," he said, voice low. "I thought he'd told you. Please don't drag me into this." I didn't flinch. "I'm not angry, Ben. I just need to know." My tone stayed gentle, but inside, every word he spoke was cutting a little deeper. Ben sighed, his shoulders dropping like the weight of the truth was finally too much to carry. "He came to a family barbecue last month," he began slowly, "with a woman named Chloe. Said you two were separated for a while. Everyone believed him." My grip tightened around the cup, the ceramic burning against my palm. Separated? He'd rewritten our marriage like it was a rumor, and they'd all believed it because why wouldn't they? Mark was always so convincing, charming, polished, every lie wrapped in a smile. I nodded, my voice steady even though my pulse was pounding in my ears. "That's interesting," I said, keeping my tone casual. "Because I wasn't separated from him. I was in Paris that week, working, for us." His eyes widened. He realized then that he'd just given me more than he should have. I stood up, dropped a few bills on the table, and smiled faintly. "Thanks for the coffee, Ben. You've been very helpful." He called after me, something about not telling Mark, but I was already gone. I didn't owe anyone silence anymore. Walking down the street, the autumn air hit my face, cold and sharp, just the way I liked it. My thoughts were racing, but my steps were calm. Every detail of his betrayal started connecting like puzzle pieces falling into place. The lies, the late nights, the sudden work trips. I'd excused it all because that's what trust does. It blinds you until it burns. But now I could see clearly. He played me publicly, and that was his first mistake. My revenge would be public too. When I got home, Mark was already there, sitting on the couch, scrolling his phone like nothing in the world could touch him. "How was your day?" he asked without looking up. "Productive," I replied, dropping my bag beside the door. The word had a different weight now. He smiled, completely unaware that I had just spoken to his brother, that I knew about Chloe, about the lie he told our families. Watching him then, so calm, so smug, I realized something. Betrayal doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it's the quiet that screams. That night, over dinner, he rambled about a project at work. I nodded, smiled at the right moments, even laughed once or twice. But inside, I was memorizing everything. His tone, his timing, the little pauses he took when he lied. I'd been blind before, but now every movement was evidence, every excuse a thread to pull. He thought I was listening out of love. I was listening out of strategy. And as he talked, I decided something. I wouldn't confront him. Not yet. I wanted proof, and when I had it, I'd burn his perfect image to the ground. Later, while he slept beside me, I opened my laptop and stared at the blank email screen. My fingers hovered for a moment before typing. "Find out everything about Mark Reynolds and a woman named Chloe. I want proof. Dates, places, photos." I read it twice, then hit send. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was focus. The kind that comes right before a storm. And somewhere deep down, I smiled. Because the cracks beneath the surface, they were about to swallow him whole. Waiting is a strange kind of torture, quiet, slow, and full of little betrayals you notice in the margins. After I hit send on that email, I told myself to stay calm, to act normal, to go on with our life as if nothing had shifted. But normal felt thin, like tissue paper over an open wound. I found myself searching through bank apps at odd hours, scanning Mark's card statements not because I wanted to spy, but because the numbers might tell me what his words would not. There they were, charges at Le Mirage, 2 covers for dinner at midnight, reservations for spa packages in his name. Each entry felt like a pinprick, small, precise, undeniable. I started to map the dates in my head, laying them beside the weeks he claimed to be out of town or stuck in meetings. Patterns emerged the way constellations do when you refuse to look away. A late dinner here, a hotel charge there, a florist's receipt with a name I didn't recognize. My hands trembled the first time I realized how easy it would be to convince myself I'd imagined it all. Except facts don't bend to comfort. Facts sit there, stubborn and bright, like stones on a path you can't unsee. I made notes, quiet and small, as if documenting a crime scene in my own living room. That night, I sat beside him on the couch, pretending to scroll through my phone while I watched him like a study subject. He joked about work stress, ran a hand through his hair, and reached for his wine. Gestures I'd known for years but now studied like new language. "You've been working so much lately," I said softly, letting the words land like a feather. He shrugged, smiling with that practiced ease that used to make me melt. "Yeah, well, someone has to pay for all this," he replied, casual and unaware that I'd already started collecting the proof that would make his casualness impossible to maintain. I smiled at him, that same soft smile he'd fallen for years ago, and said, "True. Must be hard handling all those late dinners." It was subtle, intentional, bait wrapped in sweetness. He froze for a second, the fork pausing halfway to his mouth. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his tone light but his eyes sharp. "Oh, nothing," I said, swirling my wine. "Just thinking of that place you went to, Le Mirage. I hear it's romantic." That single word, romantic, pulled the air out of the room. He looked at me like I'd set a trap he hadn't seen coming. "You've been checking my statements?" he said, defensive now, the mask slipping. I tilted my head, watching him flounder. "No," I said, steady as glass. "Just my instincts." I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and gathered the dishes while he sat there, silent. The truth had already cracked open between us, but I wasn't going to dig through it yet. Not until I had the whole picture. Not until I could make it impossible for him to lie again. Later that night, when he finally fell asleep, I sat in the dim light of the kitchen, the glow of my laptop painting the room in cold blue. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. I reread the email I'd sent to the investigator, and for the first time I felt something close to power. It wasn't revenge yet. It was control. The kind I hadn't had in months. I wasn't just the wife anymore. I was the quiet observer, the one who knew, but hadn't spoken. And he had no idea his silence was giving me everything I needed. The next few days felt like living in 2 worlds at once, the one where I smiled, made dinner, and asked about his day, and the one that existed quietly inside my inbox. Each time I saw a new message notification from the investigator, my heart skipped. Proof was coming, and I could feel it like static in the air. I caught myself studying Mark in slow motion. How easily he laughed when he lied. How naturally he reached for his phone and turned the screen away. Every gesture was another confession, just dressed as routine. I was learning him all over again, this time without love softening the edges. One night, as he sat beside me watching TV, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way I'd expected. It wasn't fire, it was ice. Clean, quiet, absolute. I didn't yell, didn't throw anything, didn't demand explanations. I simply memorized every detail, the small shifts in his voice, the way his eyes flickered when a text arrived, the way guilt made his shoulders tighten even when he smiled. And as strange as it sounds, it was liberating. I was no longer reacting to him. I was observing him, the way one studies a puzzle before taking it apart. When the investigator finally replied, the subject line was short and final. "You were right." I stared at it for a long time before opening the attachment. Photos, dates, places, all of it there in black and white. My chest tightened, not because it hurt, but because it confirmed what my instincts had whispered for weeks. I whispered to myself, "Thank you," and meant it. Because now it wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was evidence, the kind that couldn't be denied, rewritten, or dismissed as paranoia. And I knew exactly what I'd do with it. The file arrived in a plain brown envelope, the kind that looks innocent until you touch it and realize it's heavier than paper should be. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands trembling just enough to make the seal harder to tear. Inside were photographs. Mark and Chloe outside a hotel, laughing in a way I hadn't seen from him in years. Another of them walking hand in hand through a park, sunlight on their faces like some cruel parody of happiness. And then the video. Them checking into a spa together, his hand resting on her back like it belonged there. I didn't cry. I just stared until my body went still. It's strange. The truth doesn't always break you. Sometimes it rearranges you. I expected heartbreak, maybe rage. But what came instead was focus, sharp and clean. I spent the next hour in silence, the only sound the slow ticking of the kitchen clock, like it was marking the seconds before his fall. Then I picked up my phone and dialed his mother's number, my voice light, cheerful. "Hey, I was thinking, maybe another family dinner this weekend? I'll host. I have some things to celebrate." She sounded delighted. I smiled into the receiver, thinking, so will I. By the time Saturday came, the house looked perfect. Candles lined the table, the smell of rosemary chicken filled the air again, the same scent from that first dinner. Everything felt rehearsed, deliberate. Even the playlist was the same. I wanted it that way. When Mark walked in, confused but smiling, he asked, "What's the occasion?" I poured the wine slowly, meeting his eyes. "Just wanted to thank Ben," I said sweetly, "for his honesty." His face went pale. That one sentence was all it took to start the unraveling. The meal started like any other. Polite laughter, clinking glasses, small talk about nothing that mattered. Mark tried to act normal, his charm flickering on and off like a faulty light. Ben could barely look at me, his fork moving food around his plate without ever taking a bite. My parents chatted about travel plans, unaware that they were about to witness the final act of a story they didn't know they were in. I sat there smiling, feeling the adrenaline hum beneath my calm. Every second stretched, every glance carried meaning. I'd never felt more alive. Halfway through dinner, I lifted my glass and tapped it gently with a spoon. "Before dessert," I said, my voice steady, "I'd like to show you all something." Mark's hand froze midair. He looked at me the way people look at incoming storms, hoping they'll change direction. I turned on the TV, the slideshow flickering to life. The first image appeared. Him and Chloe, hand in hand. A ripple of silence ran through the room. The second photo, a kiss outside the hotel. My mother gasped. His father's jaw tightened. Ben's face went white. And Mark, he just stared, every layer of confidence stripped away. He stood up, voice shaking. "Laura, what the hell is this?" I met his eyes and smiled, not cruelly, just truthfully. "This," I said softly, "is what you built. I'm just showing your work." He stammered something about manipulation, about how I didn't understand, but no one moved to defend him. The evidence spoke louder than he ever could. I walked to the table, placed a single manila folder in front of him, and whispered, "Bon appétit." Inside were the divorce papers, fresh, final, and deserved. The room stayed frozen for what felt like forever. You could hear nothing but the faint hum of the candles. Mark's mother covered her mouth, trembling. His father stared at him like he was a stranger. And Ben, Poor, naive Ben looked torn between guilt and relief. I didn't say a word. I wanted him to sit in that silence, to feel the weight of every lie he'd told pressed back against him. Finally, he muttered, "Laura, please, let's talk about this privately." I looked at him, calm and detached, and said, "Mark, you made it public. I'm just finishing what you started." He tried to reach for me, but I stepped back, the movement instinctive, final. "You've humiliated yourself enough," I said, my tone gentle but unyielding. "You lied to everyone in this room. You disrespected this family, your vows, and me. So no, we're not talking privately. We're done." My mother's eyes met mine, full of quiet pride, and that was all the validation I needed. Mark's voice cracked as he tried to defend himself, but the words tangled and died in his throat. Truth, once released, doesn't let liars breathe easily. When I walked him to the door later, the night air felt crisp, clean, almost celebratory. He turned to me, desperation flickering in his eyes. "You planned all this?" he whispered. "Every second," I replied. "The dinner, the slideshow, even the wine you're holding." He looked down at the glass, realizing it was the same vintage we'd served the night Ben exposed him. "Full circle," I said quietly. Then I shut the door, not in anger, but in clarity. His story was over. Mine was just beginning. The fallout came faster than I expected. Within days, the story spread through his family, then his office, then their little circle of friends who thrived on gossip disguised as concern. His parents called me to apologize. Not for him, but to me. They said they'd raised him better. I didn't disagree, but I didn't comfort them either. Some lessons belong to the person who caused the wreckage. I just listened, thanked them, and hung up. Let them sit with the silence too. It's cleansing in ways words never are. Chloe vanished from his life as quickly as she'd entered it. Apparently she hadn't known about me, not the real me anyway. But when I sent her the photos, along with a polite note addressed to her fiancé, she disappeared like smoke. One of the investigators' pictures even made its way to her engagement announcement, a quiet message hidden in plain sight. I didn't do it for revenge alone. I did it for the truth. And the truth, when finally free, doesn't whisper. It roars. A few nights later, Mark showed up at my door, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, voice trembling. "Laura, please, you ruined everything. We can fix this." He sounded more desperate than sincere. I stood there in the doorway, light spilling over him like a spotlight on the last act of a play. "I didn't ruin anything," I said softly. "I just unmasked it." His shoulders sagged, and for a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. But pity is a luxury you lose when someone teaches you how betrayal really feels. He stepped closer, his hand reaching for mine like muscle memory couldn't keep up with reality. "Laura, I love you," he said, voice cracking, eyes pleading for a version of me that no longer existed. I looked at him, not with hate, but with distance, the kind that comes when the storm has already passed. "No," I said quietly. "You loved the version of me who didn't know. She's gone now." He flinched, and I saw it, the exact moment he realized I wasn't bluffing. There's a particular kind of power in detachment, the kind that terrifies those who can't control it. He begged for forgiveness, promised change, and even tried to play the nostalgia card. The one where he reminded me of our first apartment, our laughter, the plans we made when we were still naive enough to believe love could survive neglect. But memories don't erase disrespect. You can't rebuild trust on ashes. I listened, though, letting him exhaust every excuse, every plea, until the words lost meaning. Then I did the one thing he never expected. I smiled, not out of cruelty, but out of peace. Because I'd already chosen freedom, and it looked nothing like him. When I finally shut the door, it didn't slam. It clicked, soft, deliberate, permanent. I stood there for a while, my hand still on the knob, feeling the weight of everything that had led to that moment. He turned our life into a performance, and I had simply given it the ending it deserved. For years, I'd lived waiting for his approval, mistaking his charm for love. But that night, I understood something essential. Endings aren't failures. They're proof that you've outgrown the version of yourself that accepted less than you deserved. The days that followed were eerily calm. No more lies to decode, no tension simmering beneath polite conversations. Just silence, the kind that doesn't ache anymore, the kind that heals. I began rediscovering the smallest things, the sound of my own laughter, the taste of my morning coffee without his voice in the background, the peace of sleeping diagonally across the bed. Freedom doesn't arrive with fanfare. It slips in quietly, like sunlight sneaking through curtains you forgot to close. And once it's there, you wonder how you ever lived without it. Mark tried calling for a while, leaving messages that sounded more like apologies to himself than to me. Eventually, the call stopped. Friends took sides, as people always do when faced with someone else's collapse. Some called me brave. Others whispered that I was cold. I didn't care either way. They hadn't lived in my skin, hadn't felt the erosion of trust one lie at a time. They didn't know that strength isn't loud, it's silent endurance until endurance becomes choice. And I had finally chosen myself. One afternoon, I found one of his shirts buried in the laundry, the soft blue one he wore the night of that first dinner. I held it for a moment, then folded it neatly and placed it in a donation box. No tears, no bitterness, just release. People talk about closure as if it's something you're given, but the truth is, you make it yourself. Brick by brick, decision by decision. I wasn't erasing the past, I was reclaiming it. Because sometimes the collapse isn't destruction, it's reconstruction. Months later, my dining room looked the same, but the energy was completely different. The candles still flickered, the table was still set for laughter. Only this time, the laughter was real. My friends filled the space with stories and clinking glasses, the air alive with honesty and warmth. I caught my reflection in the window. The same woman, but somehow entirely new. There was light in my eyes again, not because of someone else's love, but because I'd finally remembered my own. This was what peace looked like, unperformed, unborrowed, mine. Ben showed up near the end of the evening, holding a small bouquet of white lilies. He looked nervous, almost boyish. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," he said, his voice soft. "For that night. I never meant to hurt you." I took the flowers, smiling gently. "You didn't hurt me, Ben. You gave me the truth, and that's worth everything." He exhaled in relief, and for the first time since that dinner, we shared a genuine moment of kindness, the kind built on honesty, not accident, the kind that heals old wounds without reopening them. As the night wound down and everyone left, I lingered at the table, my wine glass catching the candlelight. There was an empty seat across from me, the one Mark used to fill, but it didn't ache anymore. It simply existed, like a memory I'd already made peace with. I raised my glass and whispered, "To honesty, the kind that sets you free." The words felt like a promise, not to anyone else, but to myself. Betrayal had once been my ending. Now it was just the beginning of my self-respect, and I intended to protect it fiercely.